Hello everyone. Welcome to our animated philosophy series, where we explore timeless concepts in a modern context. Alright, let's dive into a significant and somewhat provocative chapter in 20th century philosophy, the outright rejection of metaphysics by the logical positivists. At the heart of this rejection is the idea that metaphysical claims, statements about things beyond the physical or observable world, are not just wrong or unprovable, but downright meaningless. Now, let me explain why that word, meaningless, is so critical here. For the logical positivists, led by the Vienna Circle, a statement is only meaningful if it can pass a specific test, the verification principle. This principle was designed to filter out what the positivists saw as empty or non-empirical statements. According to them, for a statement to have meaning, it must either be empirically verifiable or analytically true. What does that mean in simpler terms? If you make a claim about the world, it has to be either something that you can check through observation or experiment, like water boils at 100 degrees Celsius, or it has to be true by definition, like all bachelors are unmarried. If a statement doesn't meet one of these two criteria, the logical positivists said, it wasn't just a bad statement, it simply didn't make sense. Let's think about some famous metaphysical questions. Take, for instance, the question, does God exist? It's a profound question, right? But for a logical positivist, this question doesn't meet the standards of the verification principle. Why? Because it cannot be empirically tested. You can't directly observe God or measure divinity in a laboratory, nor is the statement God exists analytically true like a mathematical or logical statement. So from a positivist standpoint, this isn't even a meaningful question, it's outside the realm of knowledge entirely. Now, you might wonder, does that mean the logical positivists are atheists? Not exactly. They aren't necessarily denying the existence of God. They're saying the question itself is not meaningful within their framework. In fact, it doesn't even qualify as a question that can be answered. To them, it's like asking, what's the color of sadness? It's not something that can be meaningfully discussed in empirical or logical terms. Another classic metaphysical question is, what is the nature of reality? Philosophers have debated this for centuries, with theories ranging from Plato's forms to Descartes' dualism, all trying to describe what lies beneath the surface of what we observe. But once again, logical positivists found this line of questioning pointless. These metaphysical discussions often lead to abstract, speculative concepts that you can't observe or measure. How do you empirically verify the existence of forms or the soul or the essence of being? You can't. And since they fail the verification principle, these statements, according to the positivists, are meaningless. Let's now explore why logical positivism took such a hard stance against metaphysics. In the early 20th century, philosophy was undergoing significant shifts, driven by the desire to make philosophy more scientific. Thinkers like Moritz Schlick, Otto Neurath, and Rudolf Carnap, key figures in the Vienna Circle, were deeply influenced by the progress of the natural sciences, particularly physics, and they wanted philosophy to follow suit. For them, the clarity and success of science came from its reliance on empirical evidence and logical consistency. Anything that couldn't be tested or wasn't logically obvious was considered superfluous. They believed that metaphysics, with its grand, speculative claims, wasn't progressing in the same way science was. Instead, metaphysical debates often seemed to go around in circles, never reaching a definitive conclusion. For the positivists, this wasn't a sign of metaphysics being profound. It was a sign of it being empty. Their goal was to eliminate what they saw as the woolly thinking of metaphysics and replace it with a philosophy grounded in logic and observation. This brings us to one of the more colourful episodes in the history of philosophy. There's a famous story about the positivists and the philosopher Martin Heidegger, who is perhaps the poster child for metaphysical thinking in the 20th century. Heidegger's dense, abstract language about being and nothingness was seen by the logical positivists as the ultimate example of meaningless metaphysics. Carnap, in particular, singled out Heidegger, ridiculing his statements as nonsensical. Heidegger once wrote, "The nothing itself nothings," a sentence that left the logical positivists shaking their heads. To them, that was precisely the kind of sentence that sounded deep, but said absolutely nothing. If you can't verify nothings, what does it mean? These clashes highlight just how differently the two camps approached philosophy. Metaphysicians like Heidegger were trying to explore questions about existence, essence, and being, while the logical positivists were focused on what could be known, tested, and explained through clear reasoning and evidence. To further cement their stance, the positivists also viewed the history of metaphysics as full of contradictions and unresolved debates. Take the endless back and forth about whether the mind and body are distinct entities or the same. These debates, which have raged for centuries, never seem to reach a satisfactory conclusion. And for the logical positivists, the problem wasn't just that philosophers couldn't agree, it was that the very questions being asked couldn't be resolved, because they were based on concepts that couldn't be verified or falsified. By rejecting metaphysical claims, logical positivism aimed to narrow the focus of philosophy to questions that could actually be answered, preferably with the same rigor and precision as the natural sciences. They wanted philosophy to be sharp, clear, and grounded in reality, not lost in the fog of speculative metaphysics. So, to sum it up, logical positivists dismissed metaphysical claims not because they disagreed with them, but because they didn't think these claims could ever be meaningfully discussed. According to the verification principle, statements about things that couldn't be empirically tested or logically verified were simply meaningless. Famous metaphysical questions like does God exist or what is the nature of reality were seen as nonsensical, not because they were false, but because they couldn't even be meaningfully asked in the first place. This rejection of metaphysics radically changed the landscape of philosophy, pushing it towards a more scientific, evidence-based approach, and setting the stage for many of the philosophical debates that followed in the 20th century. Thank you for learning with us. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and hit the notification bell for more insights into similar echoes.